Hi, we're the Daily Titan Sports Desk. I'm Haley Sly, the sports editor. These are my assistants, Bryant Freeze and Harrison Fagan, and we're going to talk a little bit about men's and women's basketball going into the break. So, men's basketball just won their game last night. What did they do right in that game?
Coach Taylor was actually really impressed with their defense. He said that it was the first time that they had taken the scouting report and really executed it as an entire team. And even though, they gave up 31 points to Randy, I'm not going to try and pronounce his last name, and Coach Taylor kind of deadpanned after the game that we held him to 31 points, and it was actually true, but he probably could have scored more. They did a fairly decent job defensively. He just made a lot of tough shots, and they stopped everyone else from scoring. No one else on the team scored more than 5 points. So, it actually was a pretty good defensive effort, and it was better than they've shown this season. They've given up 75 points per game, which is only kind of narrowly outscoring them. They actually have scored the second most points in the Big West with 74.5 points per game on average. So, they're not losing. They're 4-6, but they're 4-1 at home. They aren't losing by a whole lot. I think they're a little bit better than their record.
Mm-hmm. Well, they should have won last night's game because, Southern Utah, they have the one player. Other than that, they don't have anyone. They're 2-6 on the season or something like that.
Yeah.
So it was a game they should have won, and they did. Like you said, they did what they were supposed to do. But
yeah.
When they go on the road and face teams that are the same skill level as them, they kind of seem to have a hard time to pull out the games late.
But the Titans are 4-6 overall, 4-1 at home. Offense hasn't really been their issue this season, right? It's been, defense, turnovers. What's been going wrong for them?
I mentioned the defense a little bit. If your points per game aren't the best measure of defense because it doesn't really account for pace, and the Titans are playing at a pretty fast pace. But if you're giving up 75 points per game in college basketball, that's pretty bad generally. So they do need to find a way to turn that off. And part of the reason for that is they've been giving up a lot of buckets in transition because they're averaging, 15 and a half turnovers per game. And, Coach Taylor, he compared their turnover issues to literally, not figuratively, literally chopping their own toes off with a machete, which was, I thought, a unique way to describe it. And, turnovers have been a big problem for them this year.
So it seems like whenever the opposing team has a really good player, they don't know how to collapse the defense on him and shut him down.
So far, it hasn't really shut down the other team's best player from an individual perspective, but they've been able to keep their teammates from getting off. And, I think the same thing like you're talking about, it happened with Markelle Fultz when they went up to go play against him at Washington. And, he lit them up as well. So they have been allowing big singular performances, but it hasn't been like another whole team is kind of beating up on them. It's been, either the other team's best player beats them by himself, or or the Titans win the game.
Speaking of individual performances, Trey Coggins is leading the Big West in scoring. On the women's side, Amon Lathan is leading the Big West in scoring.
It's always one person is contributing, but it's never a whole team effort contributing, and she's having to try and shoot the team's way back into the game, and that's just never going to work. And in women's college basketball, they tend to shoot a lot of three-pointers, and she doesn't shoot that many three-pointers. She's not good from distance. She's more of a around-the-rim player. They try and rely on the three-point shot, too, when they're not working. They don't go through their offense. They just start jacking up shots from the outside trying to come back because they dig themselves into deep holes, and then they just try and shoot threes to come back out of it, and that's not a formula that ever works.
And I think part of the reason that they've been getting into such deep holes to start games is that Lathan is coming off of the bench, and so the team, their offense has just really, really struggled when she's not every second that she's not in the game, because she is kind of the singular engine driving that offense. And so they're starting in holes every time, and I don't know if that's necessarily helping them very much. It's hard to play from behind.
See, it's a difficult thing because she started in the beginning of the season, and they got off to 0-4 start, I believe it was, and then she went to the bench and they won a couple games. So, and that she went to the bench after missing a game due to an injury. So, I don't know. When it works, that looks good and you tend to stick with it, but it hasn't worked lately. So
and it's not like it's without merits, I guess. There is, I'm sure, some value in sending her in again when teams are subbing in their bench players who probably aren't as good as their starters, and so that it maybe gives like almost a little bit of nitrous to kickstart her scoring because she's playing against less talented players to start the game. So, like, I can see an argument for it, but it is just a little bit weird, and that they've been starting almost every single game in a hole.
Yeah, and they definitely need, because she's really their only consistent scoring threat.
Yeah.
So, like you said, it's starting to not make sense why she's coming off the bench when it's digging them these holes that they're not able to pull themselves back out of.